Hi, this is Runa, and you're listening to the Changemakers podcast, where we share tips, insight, tools, and stories from other changemakers designed to motivate you to become the change you want to see in your world. Make sure you join our Changemakers community at runamagnus.com/podcast. And now, this is your time to sit back, relax, and enjoy. Good evening, good night, wherever you are. This is Runa here at the Changemakers podcast, and I have a new guest, very exciting guest. Not that not all the others are not exciting. I just get overexcited every time I talk to a new guest on this episode that we're doing day by day. This time, I am going to be talking to Isaac Tolpin, who actually talks about himself as being an edtech disturber and human behavior expert. I wonder what that means. And looking at what Isaac has been doing over the years is quite astounding, I have to say, because he comes across, and in the minute that I went to look at his website and I was doing my little research before he came into this call, I always go for that thing that I often talk about in my episodes. What is the feeling that person is giving me with the website and basically their digital footprint? I will share easily with you, and I know that he doesn't know what I'm talking about right now because I can just see his face on the screen going, what is this woman talking about? But I'm going to share with you anyway. Here is someone who definitely wants to make a difference. That is not a question. And he is doing that by really refusing to waste his life achieving the world's definition of success, because he basically feels that leaves so many people empty, and I could not agree with him more. So I'm really excited to dig a little bit into what Isaac has to tell us today, and they go a little bit into what it takes to increase employee engagement by using IT and tech and micro videos and some more goodies. So Isaac, do you say Isaac or Isaac, by the way?
It's Isaac, but I love how you're saying it. It's awesome.
Oh, okay. So now you heard the Icelandic pronunciation of it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah,
okay.
That's good.
So I will probably do both. And
yeah, good.
Yeah. Okay, good. So welcome to the Changemakers podcast. So thrilled to have you with us today.
Oh, so good to be here, Runa. And I love the purpose behind the podcast, and I look forward to this conversation.
Thank you. First of all, what does it really take to be an ED tech disturber and human behavior expert? What does that take?
So edtech disruptor and human behavior. You know, I've, like many entrepreneurs and people, they've done different things, and I've really been an entrepreneur my whole life, and just a series of events, you know, education, a lot of self-education, and being around people, you start to understand where there's a segment in the industry that needs disrupting, and that was in the e-learning space, and that comes from a background of working with tens of thousands of young adults and building a big organization, to leading my own startup company, to, you know, now in the technology space with microlearning and Conveyure. So, you know, you put all that together, and you have to, in a couple words, kind of define, you know, what you're an expert in, and those are a couple things that I've accumulated over the years, and has led to a disruption in the e-learning space with microlearning.
I love that. So that is your tagline. I just love the combination of tech and then human behavior. It doesn't always go hand in hand in our mindset, I think, but definitely is something that with the new world and looking into the future is something that really needs to go hand in hand. Can you tell me a little bit more about what you are doing?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, well, I'll give credit where credit is due. Apple, Steve Jobs really, you know, pioneered this, I think, when the phone came out. And I think that, you know, we expect to use technology that aligns with our human behavior. And if it doesn't, we might not even know why it doesn't, but we abandon it pretty quickly. Mm-hmm. Just think about your own user experiences. And then think about any time you've been in online training, online courses, or anything like that, you're probably thinking of the word boring. And you really can't retain people in anything anymore if it's boring. It doesn't matter if you're required to do it or whatever the case is. You're going to abandon that. You're not going to retain it and actually implement it. You're going to think badly about whoever asked you to do it. And so we really looked at, okay, why is there not a great solution that aligns with human behavior for creating online courses for the corporate environment or a trainer? And we started with that premise from the beginning and understanding where human behavior is today and having background in e-learning and in that industry. We came out with Convey Your, which is micro-learning platform, which aligns with where people are at with bite-sized, pieces of content with two-way communication, social learning, gamification, right to the mobile, instant notifications, easy to complete things. And so that kind of gives you a summary of some of the ways that digital can align with human behavior.
Yeah. Can you share us any stories or the transformation that micro-learning and the whole thing, the tech thing has given businesses and especially in the employee engagement field, because I think that's so, like you're saying, it's so tricky.
Yeah, it's important, isn't it? I mean, employees, companies, that's their biggest expense, and that is also in a lot of cases, and that is also an important, that is the company. The people are the company. Yeah. And if you can retain people longer, keep them happy and motivated, then you have a better, overall company and ethos and hitting all the objectives. And so a lot of times what happens is companies will have this organizational culture that they're driving. They're having employee engagement initiatives to try and retain employees and make their job better and put the foosball table in the room and all that kind of stuff. And then they have these digital training programs that they're requiring their employees to do. They're the very antithesis of the cultures they're trying to create, or they don't drive employee engagement. In fact, they make people feel less about your company when they're going through it because the experience is so inferior to the experiences they use in their everyday lives with their mobile device, for example. Yeah. And so it doesn't need to be that way. Let's make sure our digital training initiatives actually are rocket fuel to employee engagement by employees enjoying it and bringing them together and breaking down silos between departments and talking about where they're at on the leaderboard and, what they answered on something right from their phones, and driving a learning culture that really matters by, creating a rhythm of learning that's always happening versus an event when once in a while we have a training that's boring. And so we really set out to kill boring. And an example of that is we have a big bank, international bank, that had employees go through an optional 30-lesson course. And it was optional, and 100% of them made it through all 30 lessons. And it's because the lessons were, less than 5 minutes each, and they were dripped out over a period of, 30 days, just one little lesson a day. And it created a lot of engagement in that way.
Wow. And did you do a survey afterwards of what was sticking with them? What did they remember after the 30 days?
That's a good idea. I don't know that happened or not. I'm not sure, but you can see how engaged they were in answering questions, and 100% of them did it every day. And I just think that, we are so busy. Our lives are stretched, and it's really important to do that. But, I know you guys are about creating change. I mean, we're creating change with that, but I wanted to share another story with you that I think would be really powerful for people listening, is that there was a time, I'm sure there's a lot of successful people listening in, and people that have had success and maybe, are in different seasons right now. I've definitely experienced my own failures and successes. There was a time where I was leading an organization. It was my own organization in direct sales, and I had 32 offices around Washington, Oregon, all the managers running those, and thousands and thousands of people in the organization. And my competitors, we were, always like number 2 out of 40 of these organizations across the U.S. or 3. So we were near the top and doing about $5 million a year. And I think what's relevant to this audience is that despite the success, I remember being really frustrated. If anybody's listening, being really frustrated, even though you're successful, I can relate with that. And one of the things that came to mind, it was just really clear, is like, hey, if you're frustrated, the only place you should be frustrated is with yourself. Because if you're not making progress, the only thing you have control of is your own actions. And that really spurred me into a new kind of realm of motivation in learning. I went and got professional coach training to coach my managers. I read, a ton of books. I got my leaders together and asked them questions, coaching questions of how they think we could grow the organization. And really changed a lot of things. And out of those meetings and that education is really fascinating. When the economy is crashing in the US, 2008, 9, 10, we went up to 10 and 11 million a year from 5 million and did what's never been done before. And I actually didn't work harder. I have a big family. I'm a family man. And I think there's a lot of lessons out of that. But one of them is if you think you have to work harder to do better, then you're going to have a roadblock in your mind of actually making progress. And if you're an entrepreneur and you can't make progress, or you feel like you can't make progress, then you get frustrated. And I remember those feelings, and I remember going, you know what? I need to spend more time with my family. And it's also a requirement that we go to $10 million, double this business in the next few years. And only when both are necessary does our mind start to, find a plan to do that. And so I think that we need to look at where we've made silent agreements about, why we can't make more progress. And we need to refuse the normal path of sacrificing what's most important. And I think you'll find some really interesting answers.
Oh, yeah. And it sounds like you were in many boxes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Tons of boxes that you were stuck in. So did I get it right that it was really through just a simple coaching that opened up your space there for seeing things and understanding things in a different perspective?
Well, yeah. I mean, I can't say that it was any particular person that coached me. I've always had mentors, but it was really an self-awareness, I would say, that came about that caused me to go get trained as a coach to coach my leaders and make a bunch of changes. And also, decide to be home with the family even more, as my wife at the time, I think we had 4 kids at the time, and she really needed me. So it was interesting because we doubled the business and I started working like half as much, pretty soon after that because of finding new ways to do things. So I think that a lot of times entrepreneurs believe that they have to do too much and they don't set things up and they sacrifice what's most important because they're serving ambition. Ambition can be okay, but ambition running wild can destroy a life, actually. Mm-hmm. And I think it's really, really important that we understand what's most important to us and we don't sacrifice those for feeding unruly ambition. I think that if we make a principled decision not to sacrifice those things, there's seasons where you're going to work harder and not, but finding a way to do that and tee up a healthy ambition, I think is important.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And I love the fact, and I love how you are seeing it, from the perspective of the importance of being rather than doing, and the trick of not falling into, I tend to call everything boxes these days because I'm so hung up in that whole thought process. But you do get stuck in a box that you think, okay, if I'm going to succeed, it has to be the hard way. And that's another belief that you very often hear. I'm curious about the change that you want to see in your world.
Yeah, I think, at the core, I've realized after being an entrepreneur, the most powerful change I can make is raising my kids correctly and training them up. And that might be different than what some people sometimes say in a podcast, but I think that they're with you constantly. They are looking up to you as parents. And if you do that right, I think, one, you're having one of the biggest possible ways to impact the world because you're going to send them out to have impact and influence. But it leads to a life of not having regrets, which I think is really important because when you're 80, it doesn't matter how much money you have in the bank or how many trophies or accolades you have or how many times you've been written up in a newspaper or whatever. What matters is that you were honorable to the relationships that were in your jurisdiction and most important. So I think first and foremost, that's really important. I hustled and funded a company many years back that ended up failing. And even though I had that perspective, it forced me into sacrificing some things. And I look back and I go, you know what? I felt like I had to because I had to make payroll for 43 employees. Mm-hmm. But you know what? I didn't have to. I could have made different adjustments. You start to reason with yourself. And I think that's one thing. I think whatever you do, I think we're all here for a purpose, many purposes. We're all very unique. And we are supposed to find out our skills, our passions and callings, and where those intersect, and make sure that we're giving our best to contribute to the world, not just take, to contribute, to actually do things. Making money is great. It's a resource. Money's a good thing. But the love of money is where people get things wrong, and it starts blinding them from what's most important. And so there's lots of ways to make money in the world, right? It's not a matter of how to make money. It's more a matter of what you're doing to make money and the intent behind it. And I think if the intent's right, is to impact the world in your way, or your community in your way, or your customers, with your skills, then you're doing well. I think it looks different to everybody. That's why I gave you the answer I did, is because I think how it looks to me might look different to many people.
Well, I love the fact that looking at your children and looking at your family as your biggest and most important influencers and supporters is quite something. And which actually goes then, and again, I'm in my boxes, and just to give you a little insight why I'm so, an article in the Times in the UK was just posted today around conversations around IT companies offering women to freeze their eggs to postpone starting a family. And they asked me what I thought about it, and I gave them my view on that. I would love to hear your view on that specifically, because you strike me as being a father is a big thing for you, which I love. And I think basically men in general, I would like to put men in that box, that they do love to be a parent. But I feel it's often so missing in the conversations that it's a mother's thing, not the parent thing, not the dad's thing. What is your view on that?
Yeah, that's a big topic. I think, I have a 17-year-old daughter, it's our oldest of 7. And she's going off to college. I'm not somebody that drives college as something important to all my kids. I think things have changed. But she's really academically driven, and she really wants to go to college, and so I'm all supportive of what they're supposed to do. But she also earnestly wants to get married, and she wants to build a family and those things. And I see this tension, there's a tension right there of like, well, I feel like I have these skills and abilities. Maybe I'll go do this, go do that. And what I keep telling her, and she agrees with, is do whatever you're called to do right now. And if you end up meeting your husband and the family starts, you can always shift gears, and that's wonderful. That's fantastic. But I think where I would side with that is I would lean towards family being more important, when as soon as that's possible. I think that waiting and I think a lot of times is we have a sense of, this is my life, I want to do it exactly how I want to do it. But sometimes we don't have the best wisdom of our own lives. And we, maybe later you're going to wish you had more kids, or maybe later but you're older and these kinds of things. And I just think that, God set up things in a way to work, and I don't like circumventing, his plans. And so I don't mean to bring, spirituality into this show that might be more business oriented, but it has to do with that question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Quite. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's a big one, and something that I think all of us need to think about as well, because it is really about who am I, what am I here to do on this planet, and how do I follow my heart and trust that my heart is saying the right things to me.
Yeah. I'll tell you, my wife is a go-getter. I mean, she is an author, she's a speaker, she's a go-getter, and if she wanted to, she could go do a speaking circuit and do this whole thing, and you know what? But she's at home with the kids because she realizes that is a bigger way to have impact. And even though she's wired to be a go-getter in the world, doesn't mean that she sacrifices, the season of life she's in now, which is raising kids. And she's able to do a bit of both. She has courageousmom.com, and she has her own platform and stuff, but she's very careful to make sure it doesn't sacrifice the most important thing, which is conversations with kids and all that stuff.
And that seems to be your mutual goal. Yeah, exactly. Isaac, I'm going to use the Icelandic pronunciation.
I like it.
Thank you so much for a very insightful conversation. To our listeners, please go to runamagnus.com/podcast and check out this specific episode where you can download and go directly into Isaac's page and in all information that will be there. On this note, I will say thank you so much for being Was this podcast of value for you? I sure hope so. If so, feel free to share the love and give us your generous review on iTunes or Stitcher. And remember that you can always go to ronemagnus.com to find out more about the Changemakers and how we can help you drive the change you want to see in your world.